I think it's more or less 7 o'clock, so we'll get the meeting underway. Good evening, and welcome to the Woking Borough Council Planning Committee of the 11th of November. Firstly, you'll see I'm using a microphone system. Please ensure that your mobile phones are switched off or to silent, and I can confirm there's no fire drills planned for tonight. Proceedings, as you will have noticed, are filmed. It's the committee members that are filmed, and obviously the audio will also pick up those who are speaking. And that will be available on the Woking Borough Council websites. I could just introduce the relevant people here. We're all relevant, hopefully, but some possibly slightly more so than others. The Planning Committee is made up of 9 elected members of borough councillors, and we're supported tonight by a variety of professional council officers. On my far right is Mary Severin, who is the borough solicitor, who is here to give us legal advice should we be straying off the path, or to give us legal advice if we seek it. Excuse me. Next to her is Colin Kevornik, who's the Democratic Services Officer and who is clerk to tonight's meeting. Next to him is Councillor Tim Holton, who is the Vice Chairman. I'm Simon Weeks, I chair the Planning Committee. On my left is Claire Lawrence, who's the Head of Development Management. And at the far end of the table is Chris Easton, who's the Service Manager for Highways Development Management, who's here to advise us on the highways and transport matters. And people sitting on the left and right are the remainder of the committee, and the other people sitting over there to the left are the planning officers who will be presenting the planning applications tonight. This is a quasi-judicial committee. We have set and formal procedures of conduct. Firstly, the planning officer will present each application. Then I will call in turn only those who pre-registered to speak. If you come forward to the table just here, and there's a grey button on the microphone at the base, and when the light comes on, that's when your allocated time starts. I hope you're all aware, those who registered to speak, that your time is 3 minutes. Please be very short to get your key messages across in that time, because it's no doubt disappointing for everybody if you've just finished your introduction when your 3 minutes is up and you've never got to your key points. See any others. As I say, the members of the committee are interested in the quality of what you have to say, rather than necessarily the quantity. And as I say, only those who are pre-registered to speak are able to address the committee. All other interested parties have had opportunities in the preceding couple of months, when the planning applications have been out to consultation, to submit their views to the council. Following the planning officer's presentation and the comments of the registered speakers, the planning committee will then hear from those registered speakers, I say. Then the planning committee will actually debate, question, and hopefully reach decisions on all the items on the agenda tonight. I should stress that it is not, sometimes we don't reach a decision on a planning application because we require more information, because we feel that's needed to make a decision, that generally we are able to make decisions. And finally, a reminder that as the local planning authority, our role is to determine valid planning applications, using local and national planning policy guidelines. Our role is not to suggest alterations to schemes, whether they are a good idea, whether they are needed, whether they make economic sense, whether they're too costly, whether the applicant is a good or bad person, or any other matters. Our role is simply to apply the planning regulations. So without further ado, we'll move straight on to the planning committee. And I'd like just to start by asking, is there anybody here for the Sutton's Business Park planning application?
I'm representing the applicant.
Okay, you're not registered to speak.
No, that's fine.
That's good, just here as an observer.
Yes, yeah.
Right, I'm sorry you're going to draw the short straw, so I'm going to swap you with another item on the agenda, which means you'll have to wait for them first. So we will have the tree preservation order, followed by the land at Biggs Lane, followed by Montague Park, followed by the lodge at North Court, then Sutton's Business Park, and then land adjacent to Norton Road. Okay, so we're slightly changing the order to reflect the number of people in the audience, so that you don't have to sit through all the rest of the items. Okay, do we have any apologies? No. Good, thank you. Do any members need to declare an interest in any of the items on the agenda this evening? Okay, all right. I have the minutes of the last meeting, which all members have had circulated. Does any member wish to make any changes or modifications, corrections to those? In that case, I will sign those as a true record. Thank you. And I assume there are no items to be deferred or withdrawn. In that case, we go firstly straight on to the first application, which is relating to a tree preservation order.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very straightforward. It's confirmation of two tree preservation orders in the Arborfield Garrison site, 1502 and 1503. There's only small changes to 1502, the omission of trees T3, T4 and T5, and taking adding a new tree, adding a new T6, although not adding a new tree, as on closer inspection it wasn't close enough to the group G1 to be included in it, so it's now a separate tree located slightly to the southeast of group G1, which you will see on page 23 of your agenda. So there's that point, and then there's another point I was asked to speak about, the sort of flexible nature of TPOs and the strategic nature of TPOs on large-scale development sites. They're not terribly flexible, and they can't be strategic because of the nature of the legislation, but where a detailed layout and design comes before committee, committee will be reminded that where the works to TPO trees are, or the felling of TPO trees is required to implement a permission, then it's deemed to be exempt from the need to apply for permission. Effectively, the planning permission trumps the TPO. But of course, committee will have a good opportunity to ensure that where trees are needed to be removed to facilitate good design, a good number of high quality trees can be planted as replacements under section 198 of the Town and Country Planning Act.
Chairman, can I just clarify one major point on that? The reason that the council has generally placed TPOs on the SDL sites is to ensure that those trees are retained. It doesn't mean that they will never be removed. What it means is that we can assess a layout and a proposal in the context of what is there at that particular time to prevent any removal of the tree prior to the submission of a planning application. And as Chris has explained, any future plans that show removal of TPO trees, we can assess that, seek suitable replacements, and we can then, that planning permission will then take precedence over TPO. Thank you.
So in essence, what we're saying is that the the TPO gives the council the position that it ultimately has control over the trees rather than they are permanently protected. It gives them control to ensure that should there be need to remove any of the trees, there is appropriate replanting and other things.
That's
taken
correct.
into consideration. Right. Members, this is a fairly procedural matter, and we have no one speaking on this. Does anybody wish to speak on this? I'll press.
This matters before the committee because there's been an objection to it. That's correct, isn't it? So do we have all the information that SJ Simon Jones Associates Limited have produced? We haven't actually got a copy of the letter. Have their views been fairly reported in the paper?
Yes, really, Chairman. If you look through the application report, it does actually set out what the comments and the objections were in respect of the TPO and officers' response to that.
If I could add, one of the recurring themes was that not many of these trees were visible from a publicly accessible space. But of course that changes immediately upon the site being opened up for development. So it was considered expedient to take, to confirm the TPO.
Chris, you still got a point?
That comment that Chris just made, is that comment you just said, is that in the report? That's a point that the objectors made and we need to make it clear.
Yes, I believe it is. I'm trying to remember where now. Yes, I think throughout pages 17 and 18, pages 17 and 18 there's a table. And I think it's there in each case for each tree or group of trees, greater public accessibility, etc., etc. It comes up again and again. There was another objection over the woodland, the extent of the woodland, in that there was a different character to one part of the woodland to another part. But I tramped extensively across the woodland and found it to be mainly woodland that had grown out of hedgerow trees and hedges in low-lying wetlands. So it is secondary woodland, but it's located in the Sang, or proposed location for a site of accessible natural green space, and therefore appropriate to obtain it. Good quality secondary, or reasonable quality secondary woodland.
Okay, because on page 13, Chris, it does summarise the applicant's concerns
Yes, I was aware it was in. I was just ensuring that they were comprehensive.
Any other members wish to add anything to this before we go to the resolution? I see no one else indicating wishing to speak, so members, are you happy to support the recommendation? Could you please indicate? And that is unanimously carried. Thank you. And we now move on to the first of the reserved matters applications relating to the site known as Arborfield Garrison, or the Arborfield SDL. And this is the very first phase of development. The application has previously received outline permission for 2,000 new houses primarily on the land, the MOD land, which is now being vacated. And this is the first reserved matters application for 113 dwellings. I think Connie will be happy to discuss the case officer. Okay,
Thanks, Chair. As Simon said, this is the first of the applications coming forward on the Arborfield Garrison site, which is the major development location in South Woking. The applicant is Press Nicholson. The proposals are for the 113 dwellings with access onto the site up Biggs Lane, Princess Marina Drive, internal access roads, parking, landscaping space, open space, footpaths, and the flooding drainage features, which we call SUDS, Sustainable Urban Drainage Systems. The application only seeks the permission for the details of those, so in terms of it seeks the appearance and layout of the development, and scale and heights of the development. Other specific site issues, like more detailed flooding issues, are dealt with under separate condition applications. So some of the site background is part of the SDL site in Arborfield. Outline consent was given in April for the wider development, which sets out the principle of development on the site and also set out the development parameters within the site, so building heights, types of buildings, where they're going, and the types of uses across the site. So to give you an idea of where the site is in relation to the garrison site itself, the red line obviously donated. At the moment it's not open to the public, but obviously it will be quite shortly. So the red line donates where it is. The blue line is the wider SDL development, so it's in the context of the wider scheme, it's a small parcel in the top corner. This just shows you where the roads are. Princess Marine Drive, which is the main access way through the actual garrison site at the moment, and Biggs Lane, which runs to the south of it. And there's also a pond directly to the east of the, or a lake directly to the east of the site itself as well. And Sang will be provided to the west. So moving on. So for consideration, as I said, it's design, scale, appearance, height, the layout of the site, so the internal roads, where the open space is, landscaping within the site in terms of what's being retained, what's being proposed, open space areas, parking obviously that comes with the houses, and the drainage areas within the site, and to ensure there's capacity within the site to cope with this development coming forward. So to look at some of the main issues that were raised coming forward on the site, the original submission, there was some design issues raised in terms of the buildings. They were very modern, they didn't really reflect what was found locally, and there was an overuse of weatherboarding, so fibre cement type weatherboarding on the houses and the apartments or flats. Some of the landscape retention, there's some issues over that and the design of where it was going. And there's questions raised on flooding issues. Flooding was actually considered on the outline, so there's a flood risk assessment that was approved under the outline, which covers the whole site. So the key to this one is really, can it sustain its own drainage within the site parameters and red line boundary. And obviously the main issue does conform with our standards. Amended plans were submitted to address the points of design really, and these were looked at, so I'll run through these now. So this is the site layout. As you can see to the west or the left as you look at that picture is the lake, and there's a central green space that runs kind of through the site, and to the other side, of the right hand side as you look at that picture, there's a SANG which was approved under the outline again, which comes as part of this. There's a well landscape strip to the north of the site as well, and where possible trees, the significant trees have been retained, and there's a lot of new substantial planting that will go in as part of this new development. So the way the developer broke it down, they broke it down into 3 character areas, which are outlined here, just to give you an idea of the kind of feel they were going for when they were looking at the site. So you have the central section of the site, which was more villagey, they felt. The green edges, which is next to the SANG through the middle of the site, and the lakeside edge, which again is very well, very heavily landscaped at the moment, with a lot of vegetation there. So the idea was to open up views to the lake and make that a more accessible area for everybody. So to give you an idea of the green edge, how they looked at it again, you have the central green space. At the moment, all there is a mound there. There used to be a large building, officers' building there, that was demolished. So what you have is you have the pond on the western side of the left, again, as you look at that picture. And then you have a central green corridor with the mound being retained because it adds some landscape value to it, because there's a lot of mature trees on there. So there was options to take it out, but it was felt for ecology and visual purposes to leave it in, and that links into the space, the SANG space, which is the larger open space to the west. So the type of housing that's proposed in that is a typical 3-bed, 4 or 5-bed houses along that, semi-detached and detached houses. So they make up the backbone of that element. There's also 3-storey houses, I think, yeah, and flats as well to bring up the housing density on the site. So this kind of gives you just a feel for what the designs are and how it works through. So that's looking through the central section of the site, central road that runs through the site. Again, this is looking at the lakeside edge now, which is obviously a prominent feature that they want to bring into the scheme and open it up. So that means there's a lot of vegetation that will have to come out along the lake frontage, and so there's a lot of kind of scrub vegetation. Any of the significant trees, where possible, are being retained, and there's a full tree survey that covers the site specifically for this and also for the wider outline scheme. That was assessed as part of the outline application that was considered to be acceptable in terms of what trees were going and what trees were being taken away. Where trees are being taken away that are of a more significant value in terms of for the development to accommodate, and there'll be large planting schemes going in. So to give you an approximate, there's probably about 90 trees coming out, but there's well over 200 trees going in, and they're not small saplings in most cases. They're some of the larger trees that are going in to make up for that loss, and a lot of the trees that are coming out are actually poorer quality. So it'll be a benefit to the scheme, we hope. So basically the lakeside edge, this is where some of the terrace and housing are, and there's also flats located along here. You can see that the designs are more modern in their appearance. Given the location of the site and the type of area it is, i.e. it's an MOD site that's coming forward, it was felt by the architects there's a lot of opportunity to bring forward a more modern scheme in the area, as opposed to the very traditional type of housing that we get. It's their flagship scheme because it's phase one, as you can imagine. So this is the idea is it's going to be very well designed. Materials will be very good to help obviously promote the site as it goes forward. So this again gives you an idea of the before and after elevation. So the original submission is on the top, and what you had is a lot of fibre cement cladding that was proposed. What we asked them to do is reduce it down, change some of the designs and the proportions of buildings to get them to work better in a more traditional feel. So you have this fibre cement has come off, and actually they're using real wood now in some of the cladding. So we feel it's a much better scheme than was originally submitted. So I'll just run through some of these elevations, street elevations. It shows you the kind of difference. I don't know how easy it is to pick up there, but we'll try and run through it for you. Again, you'll see the larger flats. The flats that were being proposed were quite large in scale. They had a lot of this fibre cement used. The balconies were quite heavy in design features. So what we did is we got them to go away and look at how to reduce the bulk. They're still, again, very modern in appearance, you could say, trying to reflect some of the more traditional proportions in some of the outside features you get. So over the windows you get brick features. And the balconies are reduced down, and the use of render to try and break up the overall bulk as well. Again, just so surely you can see it. Again, you can see the use of fibre cement is reduced off the scheme quite a lot. More brick in tradition with walking. And again, the small use of render to try and break up the feel and give a more interesting visual character. Again, this shows a similar. So this is a view if you view it from the lake. You can see the green element in the middle, which is that mound to the right hand side of the picture on the bottom. And there is levels differences across the site, so it was making sure they worked as well. It's very important. So this is a plan which again I don't think it's coming out very well, but it shows it's the tree protection and tree planting plan. So you can't really see it, but there is on this plan it shows the trees that are coming out. And some of them have come out already as part of the works, the pre-planting works. And also shows the trees to go in. I think one of the key things is, as I said before, it's where we're losing trees that are larger and more significant in terms of visual amenities. We are making sure that trees are going in are pretty big trees that are going. They're not small saplings. They'll be larger scale species, and they'll be put in appropriate places. So unfortunately, with any development going forward, you're going to lose some of the landscape on the site. I think the main bit where you're probably losing the most vegetation is probably along the lakeside, because at the moment you can't really see views of the lake, and the idea is to bring it up, bring it into the public realm, and it becomes a very attractive feature in terms of that area, and that will help everybody who lives there in the future and locally. So looking at some of the issues in terms of access and movement, the outline permission obviously established the whole scheme is I don't remember how houses are now, but the whole scheme basically worked in terms of highway modelling, and the Section 106 secures all the junctions that need to be improved and all the various sort of highway infrastructure that works, and to make sure everything is working. So this scheme only looks at phase 1 and such. So we're looking really at parking at the roads within the site and access to the site for this. I think that's quite important. Things like the construction management plan are actually dealt with under a separate condition, so they wouldn't be relevant to this application. There's various conditions applications that run in parallel to this as well, that deal with the very site-specific issues, so things like specific drainage issues and things like that. So they're also being assessed. The layout in terms of the pedestrian access, we had to make sure that that was suitable in terms of people getting to and from the site and across the site. The wider strategic area, because obviously this is phase 1 in a much larger parcel, and the site's constrained in ways in terms of when sites are coming forward and being released by the MOD to Crest, Nicholson, to the developer. So there's a wider strategic plan that looks at integration throughout the site, and that's cycling, pedestrian, horse movement, and obviously anything sustainable, so buses. And in terms of the cycleway, bridleway connections along Biggs Lane, this is actually secured by a condition on the outline as well. So this just gives you a feel for where the main movements are within the site. You have Biggs Lane to the south, Princess Marina Drive to the north, and they're the two main accesses. There's obviously new development coming, or will come forward in the future, to the north and south of this, but this actually shows you the two main accesses to the site. And there's a pedestrian link that runs along Biggs Lane as well to the south. In terms of parking standards, these were looked at 213 dwellings, 113 dwellings, 213 spaces. So it accords with our space standards. We did a lot of work to make sure the parking spaces were in the right places, so the visitor spaces weren't in places that are relevant to if you lived in one corner of the site, so they're evenly spread throughout. It basically, as I say, it meets our parking standards. The garages are sufficient size as well, meets our cycle standards as well in terms of storage. So just touching on the construction plan, because obviously that's usually an issue I just want to touch on here. It's secured through the Section 106, so the movement plan is, and this is it, this comes from the Section 106, so it shows where construction traffic would come, where it can't go in and where it's due to be accessed. There's a separate condition, 65, of the outline consent that covers that. So it's again separate to this application and the consideration on this one. So the main consideration is, did the scheme accord with our policies? The answer to that is yes, in terms of garden size, internal space, parking standards. One of the issues that's come up on a few sites is with regards to the new parking standard that's come in. Not parking standard, sorry. New internal space standards come in. The way the actual regulations are wrote is there is discretion for local planning authorities to look at that and make sure, as long as it is in accordance with your standards that you had, which are actually, in essence, they're better for the smaller units, which is really the key thing. So the difference between the new standards and the old standards is the new national standard. The bigger houses actually get bigger. The smaller houses and flats, which are actually the key ones you want to protect, are the same. And Crest Nicholson are working to them to our old standards. And the reason they're working to our old standards is the scheme was designed up a long time before the regs came in. So there has to be some level of discretion when you're dealing with applications, because you can't start the scheme off from day one again if something changes. So with most regs, there's always a level of discretion. We feel that it's fine. It meets our original standards, which we feel actually are better than the new ones coming in. So it's quite important to make that point. And also, I think looking forward from here on, so the next phase 2 that comes forward, we'll be seeking the development meets the new standards. So that's what we'll be looking. In terms of site-specific issues, as I said, drainage and the overarching principles in terms of movement around the site, that is actually covered under separate applications. So, in summary, it meets the standards. We think the designs, yes, are modern, but we think they're actually an improvement of what was submitted originally, and they're quite different from a lot of developments you get, and it really will stand out amongst all the other developments you get in both the southeast and around. We looked at another site that Crest did up towards Northampton, and actually it was similar design principles, so based on the Garden City principles. And we felt actually, when it's built, and that's really what you want to see, it came across really well and it did look like a really good scheme. So from an officer point of view, in terms of design, we think the scale design is acceptable and pretty good. So the recommendation is approval subject to the conditions on. Just looking at the members' update, the main one to note really is there's the plans which have been edited, so there's a long list of plan numbers and document numbers for approval. Condition 8, which is bus stops, was actually removed because it's not required. It's covered under the section 106, so we don't need it. And then the numbers will be reordered accordingly. And also condition 12, there's a plan number going in, an updated plan number to cover that. So that's really the numbers update. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Conrad. We have 2 people registered to speak. And first, could I ask Lawrence Heath from Barkham Parish Council. Good evening, Lawrence. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I would like to comment that Barkham Parish Council are very pleased that Crest Nicholson have stuck with the Garden Village principles. And I think we'll end up with a community that's far superior to many of the tedious estates that seem to appear around our towns and villages. I would also commend Crest Nicholson on making a serious attempt at consulting with local people. I'm pleased we've had some good dialogue with them, and as a consequence, many improvements have been made. In particular, I'd mention that they've responded positively to our comments about the architectural styles. And I'm also pleased that they've committed to a consultation on the place name. There is unfortunately one issue on which I wish to record an objection. This concerns the felling of trees, and specifically it's the juxtaposition of the willow trees and the apartment block at the very north end of the lake. I'd request that Crest consider the layout here. The fact that we've not been able to visit that part of the site does not help us make a judgment, and I'm pleased that in fact that Crest are trying to arrange a site visit for us. So I'm, admittedly not having seen the thing properly, I'm sure that there is a better solution with redesigning that particular bit, and I don't think it means making massive changes. But that particular corner is highly visible. If it comes out right, it can create an iconic view, which really, I think, will help promote the whole development. There's a few other comments I'd just like to quickly skip through. Some of these actually perhaps relate to the S106 agreement and the directive of the boroughs, perhaps rather than the Crest. Specifically, I think more work needs to be done on practical solutions concerning transport, public transport in particular, greenways, crossings, and safe routes to school. And finally, I would just like to mention the subject of flooding. I'm aware that the flood modelling has been done and it sort of all supposedly meets certain standards. But Biggs Lane is in an area of clay. It has flooded in the past. And I would just ask for both Crest and the borough to make doubly sure that they've really got this right. Because if it has to be resolved after the event, it's going to cost you a lot of money. You know, and I know it meets the standards, but there are plenty of examples around the place of standards which don't actually meet the requirement expected of them, you know, in other industries. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence. And we'll then ask Hugo Reeve from Crest Nicholson. Good evening.
Evening, members, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Both Connor and Lawrence have rather stolen a little bit of my thunder, so I will keep this very brief. The first phase does need to set out our stall for this garden village, and that was very much the vision we sold at the outline planning stage. It's very much the vision we intend to deliver. So this has been an important one for us to get the landscaping and the garden village ethos right. And we feel, as you can see from that plan up there, we feel confident and excited that we've achieved this in this plan, and I think the actual landscaping and the layout has received very little criticism, if anything, compliment. So we're pleased with that. However, as you have heard, we did get some criticism, mainly from the parishes, regarding the elevation architecture. And we did take a step back at that. That was a bit of a surprise to us after our consultation efforts. And we took a step back to actually re-evaluate ourselves, to listen. And we took the painful step from our point of view, but quite correct step, I'm sure, from the community's point of view, to delay the application to give ourselves time to redesign and consult, because we did actually concede to ourselves we saw the opportunity of making it better. And that was something that was pointed out to us. We worked with people, and we're very pleased to say that the proposals before you are now significantly better in our minds, having gone through that process with a better palette of materials, better proportioned elevations, and a better roof scaling on the number of the buildings. So we're happy to say that it is now a better scheme that we're more proud of as well, and I think that's very much represented by the number of people that have, from our side, that have actually come here tonight, that have wanted to be here tonight, because they're proud and they've worked very hard on it. To comment on Lawrence's comment on, especially regarding the flooding and the wider impacts, we're here for the next 10 years. This is the first piece of the jigsaw puzzle. It's very much in our interest to make sure that the other pieces of the jigsaw puzzle fit in, especially around this site, and especially issues like the flood modelling. We are modelling that, and we will give the commitment to continue to model that with your officers very carefully to make sure as each piece comes in, we do not get caught short, because as Lawrence quite rightly says, that will cost us as well as the locality significantly. So we are very committed to making sure that will work in the long run. And the same with regards to the open space and the wider transport networks as we link this all together. The last point I was going to make is that this is the first phase, and its delivery is very important and key for the overall financing, and our financing and the DIO's financing of the project as a whole, in terms of the wider infrastructure that we are underway with getting in place. So we want to move forward very quickly to deliver this, and to put the first hit the first milestone in delivering your SDL. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, members, just a few comments before we go to the speakers. I'm very glad that Crest have this, because I have to say from what I heard within the council as well, it wasn't just the parishes who were singularly unimpressed by the first submission in terms of the design. Clearly what we have before us now is very much better, and that's that is reflected broadly not only in Barking Parish Council's comments, but Arborfield, who say that they're pleased to see the revised applications a vast improvement on the original one, and has taken into consideration the comments raised. The other thing about the design is, of course, is that there's a certain unusual thing about this, that it's because it's a new development, the houses don't have to match immediate neighbours, because in many cases there are not immediate neighbours, so it is able to some extent create its own character. And I think the designs that we have before us, as I say, are quite innovative without being unduly stark or completely alien to the local vernacular. I think the other attractive feature of this initial phase, of course, is that I don't know what proportion of them, Connor, maybe you can tell me, but because of the natural slope of the site, is most of the properties are presumably going to have a view of the lake. A good portion of them anyway.
Well, yeah, the one's probably to the front half, yeah, definitely.
So I think that will be quite an attractive feature in that sense. We've heard that parking standards parking meets our standards. We've heard that garden sizes meet our standards, and we've heard that the internal space meet our current standards. The government is changing those standards, and we've heard that those new standards will be reflected in phase 2 and subsequent phases. We've also heard that bus stops have been taken out of it, and that isn't because there's not going to be any bus stops, but like a number of the other aspects of these developments, the council is taking the responsibility to put in such things as bus stops, which are fairly small, and large things such as schools, which are, by their very nature, very large. The other thing is obviously the have been concerns expressed about flooding, and as I think Crest Nicholson, the representative, has indicated, that this is a flagship site for them, and clearly they don't want press coverage of residents wading around in Wellington boots with their furniture floating any more than anyone else does. But just would remind people that this is going to be an El Nino winter, and they're promising a lot more rain than normal, so that will hopefully prove that all the calculations have turned out to be correct, and I very much hope that is the case. And then finally, I think we heard about the very specific issue of the apartment block of the Willows in the very north of the site, which is, I think, subject to some ongoing discussions with Barkham. But if we are minded to approve this tonight, those discussions will obviously limit those discussions going on, but we are approving what's in front of us, or being asked to approve what's in front of us, not a change scheme, a subsequent change scheme that meets everybody's requirements, would clearly be looked at favourably. So come on to ward members. I'll go to Rochelle first. Sorry, my apologies. John, you of course are a ward member, and we always give the opportunity to speak first.
Thank you, Simon. I forgot. Obviously, it's a very important step for the council. It will turn a somewhat scruffy old army camp into, hopefully, which will be an award-winning development. I would like to think, and I must say, I go along with Lawrence, and the developer's approach to consultation and working with the local community has been excellent. I know because I live in the community. I'm glad we meet all the space standards, and I would hope to think that you can agree something with the road trees, because I do think it will enhance your development, and that's really all I've got to say about it. But I would suggest, thank you for listening to what's been said by both the residents, the parish, and the borough council.
Okay, Rochelle.
As far as the parking standards go, you said there's 113 dwellings and 209 spaces total, according to page 43. I've got a few questions. How about future-proofing? At this point, a third of our houses in the borough are being occupied by children in their 20s, and they all have cars because they have to get to work. So that means 3 cars per family in a third of the houses. Are we going to have enough spaces for future-proofing? Because the rate prices are going up, it's highly unlikely that children will be able to buy houses till their 30s. I know that's not...
You know what my response is going to be, Rochelle. If the policy is wrong or needs changing in the future, we need to change the policy. We can't make up policy on the fly.
But I'm just looking at the 113 versus 209. It should be 226 spaces, and I still don't count garages as anything other than storage spaces. If it's based on any one of our existing developments, I would say that approximately 90% of them are occupied by junk, not cars. And next of all, I'd like to say, since this is a new idea, and since they're doing all these modern designs, why isn't there more renewable energy? Because that would be useful for the future, because we are having a problem with power.
I think I recall that, Connie, you probably, as part of the outline application, there was a requirement that certain renewable elements were included. I think it was a fairly small percentage, but I recall that was included in the outline.
It wasn't in here, that's why.
No, yes. It was discussed at the outline.
It's not.
But it is included. Again, it's something that's changed as part of the course. That there's a new national standard coming in, so things are evolving in that. But there is a requirement to provide houses that meet a certain code, basically, in terms of sustainability.
What about renewable energy?
Well, basically, I would say is that the market, in terms of how buildings get built now, has moved away from solar panels and moved away from that side. It's more to do with how you build, we call it fabric first approach. So it's how you build the houses, orientation of the houses, loss of insulation, things like that.
Just to answer your question, on page 56, if you see the second paragraph there, point 49, it says there's a condition in the outline permission to secure low and zero carbon technologies, so to demonstrate how the development will achieve a 10% reduction in carbon emissions beyond the minimum requirement of Part L building regulations. That's included in the report. Okay. Did you have a third point?
No, it was just the fact that I would still like to see more renewable energy, because we do have a problem in the UK at this point we've had some emergency shutdowns with inadequate amount of electricity in a few places, and we need to be prepared for the future.
Okay, thank you. Bob?
Yeah, quite a few questions really, but none of them too difficult to answer, I would have thought. First of all, mentioned taking out vegetation around the lake. Has any of that been assessed by the ecological officer as being breeding areas or anything?
Yeah, everything that's coming out has been assessed. That's
Okay.
all assessed.
You mentioned a lot of timber cladding. Is it going to be sufficiently well treated so that it doesn't look the worst thing since sliced bread? After a few years, because quite a lot of timber cladding looks blooming horrible afterwards.
It can do. The sample we got off them in terms of the one they're using should be fine because it's the one they used up in a different site and it looks fine.
Okay, you had a throwaway line about trees already out. I thought you weren't allowed to take trees out until you actually started development.
As part of the outline, there was an assessment of landscaping on site. So in terms of getting in to do some of the works, they've been taking out some of the lower vegetation. But basically, any of the ones they took out were already consented to go as such, as part of the outline.
Okay. There's also a request for Pegasus crossings. I haven't heard that mentioned. And the throwaway line in Para 76 on page 60, just to get my archaeological bit in, it said, Berkshire archaeology is satisfied given the nature of the features encountered. What features?
I have to say, I can't tell you what features. They did come back to us and they said they were happy with what's been done because, again, the archaeology is covered under a separate condition. I don't have the details in front of me of what was in there, but I'll get them for you.
Thank you. No, that's fine.
All right. Chris? Thank you. I've just got one left from my questions here, and that's the glazing. I'm not sure. This question about half glazing, did that go out with the redesign or?
Yeah, so basically originally they had full length windows more or less, and we learned from a few mistakes we've made elsewhere where basically we have full length windows. If they put a cabinet behind us, it doesn't look very well. So all we've got them to do is change the type of windows they have so you don't have that you don't have a cabinet behind it and it doesn't look awful when you see it from the street scene. So there's a little bit of control going forward.
Right, because in fact it's a criticism of that, but I think perhaps making criticism of the parish council weren't aware of the reason why it's there, but I'm happy with that explanation. Thank you. Okay, Bob, did you look at that?
There was one I forgot, sorry. On the first page of the A3 drawings we've got, there's a large, bottom half, there's a large blob of white with a long window in it.
Render.
What is it? Because it looks awful.
Render.
Okay. Just looks awful.
Design is, of course, one of those very subjective things that every individual person's view of design is going to be.
Why do you set my vote? Because it looks awful.
Chris?
Thank you. There was a comment from Finchhamstead Parish Council about the provision of high-speed fibre optic network. Has that been addressed?
That was covered in the outline.
Yeah, I mean basically the site in terms of this parcel, the service margins in place to allow that to go in. What you find is that the BT and the service provider, Virgin or whoever it is, will go in and put them in once they're in, but they won't go in advance to do it. We've had long conversations with the service providers to try and get them to put the services in first to connect, but the point is you get the areas, you get the ducting ready to go, so it's good to go in as soon as.
I think, Chris, we have covered this on some previous applications about high-speed broadband. I think anybody building new homes in Wokingham who didn't provide such facilities is going to be considering what a web-enabled area we are will be at a distinct disadvantage compared with other developments. John?
Just one point leading on from that. I don't know if we can do this, but I'd like to think the services will be put in a suitable place so we don't have to dig the road up every 30 years.
That's the point of Chris, I'm sure. Could you confirm that? That's the whole purpose of ducting and things like that?
Yeah. It's a bit how you mind as well, in honesty. So we've tried where we can. Unfortunately, the only service that probably will run in the carriageway still is your mains valve.
So that's the only other thing, your surface water. But other than that, we've got dedicated service margins. We've ensured working with the developer that obviously we get the correct level that the council requires around the site. So that is something that shouldn't be happening.
Okay, thank you.
Won't be happening.
Okay, I see no other members indicating, and there's not been any alternative proposals put forward, so I can draw this to conclusion. Members, as I say, just to summarise, this is the first phase of the Arborfield SDL, first actual building phase, and we clearly see that the applicant seems to have been recognised in the local community as having listened to people's reservations and has come back with a what I perceive as significant improvement in the appearance of the dwellings. And I think we've seen from the layout that it will be quite an attractive feature, and I'm sure Crest will want to try and make this one of their showpiece sites, and I would hope that would set an equally high bar for the subsequent phases that will come forward over the following number of years. So members, could you please indicate whether you're prepared to support the officer recommendation, supplemented by the information in the members' update? And that is also unanimously approved. Thank you, members. So, unless Crest Nicholson representative would like to stay for the rest of it, please feel free to go. Thank you. And we'll now move on to Montague Park. Just wait for these people to leave. Okay, so Montague Park, you all know, formerly known as Buckhurst. I think it went from Buckhurst Farm to Buckhurst Park, and eventually became Montague Park. And this application relates to a wish to vary part of the application on a quite small part involving a small number of dwellings and flats. Straight across to it.
Thank you. Montague Park is the first phase of the South Wokingham Strategic Development location, and an outline planning permission for 650 dwellings with the associated infrastructure was granted back in December 2012. Since then, reserve matters have been approved for 5 of the 7 phases of the development, including phase 5, which is the area highlighted in red there. And as the Chairman's already mentioned, it's a very small part of the phase that alternative proposals have been put forward for, roughly in the location identified in the black dot there. So this is the approved layout for phase 5. It's part adjoining the Sutton Distributor Road, and what was approved on the site was a short terrace of 7 3-bedroom houses, and then a flat over the access to the rear parking courtyard, which is via the side road that you can see there. The alternative proposal would substitute 1 1-bedroom flat and 12 2-bedroom flats as an alternative to the approved scheme, so resulting in a net gain of 5 overall. The thing to be clear about is it doesn't change the total of 650 approved within the outline application. The main issues arising from this proposed alternative scheme are really the character of the area, housing mix, parking provision, and Town Council has also raised concerns about the implications in terms of drainage. So I'll just briefly cover those 4 key topics. In terms of the mix and character, the outline planning application and then subsequent design code establish parameters for the development, which themselves followed our policy and guidance. And really, I think this amendment needs to be seen in the context of not only phase 5, but the wider Montague Park development. The parameters that were established by the outline planning permission sort of set up the broad strategy with denser and higher development along the Southern Distributor Road and the secondary access road, which are the darker coloured areas you see on these drawings, and then lower density development around the periphery of the site, so on London Road, Clay Lane and around what will be the edge onto the public open space within the development. And these parameters underlie 6 character areas within the development, of which 3 are found within phase 5. And you can see the blue area along the Sutton Distributor Road is within one of the denser areas of development where higher buildings up to 3 or 3.5 stories are acceptable. And it was established that there would probably be a mixture of flats and terraced houses within that character area. The pink area you see is one of the lower density areas, characterised by predominantly detached family housing on rather more spacious plots, giving a softer edge to the development and allowing it to blend more into the surroundings. And then you've got a sort of intermediate character of semi-detached and small terraces of houses of 2 and 2.5 stories within the yellow area. So you can see that this application relates to the part where the expectation is of a more dense development of flats and terraced housing. And then if I move on to the street scenes, you can see at the top the approved street scene along the Distributor Road, and the area I've identified with the red arrow is the part we're talking about under this application. Then the middle row you see what is now proposed with the flats replacing the terrace of houses, and then at the bottom it's the street scene turning the corner into the side road. By comparison of the heights, the approved scheme, you have a fairly consistent ridge height of about 11.5 metres. The flats have a lot more variation with the ridge height coming up to 12.8 at the very highest point on the corner, which is still within the maximum height parameters, and dropping down as low as 8 round the side street. So there are, in fact, in visual terms, probably some benefits in terms of slightly more varied ridge line and also having more of an active frontage turning onto the side street as well as onto the Sutton Distributor Road. In terms of the mix, as I've already mentioned, the net change is going to be an increase of 12 2-bedroom flats compared to a loss of 7 3-bedroom houses, and concerns being raised by board members and the Town Council about the reduction in family housing within the phase. But again, I think this is something we need to look at in the context of the whole development, because as I've said, there's different character areas within the development, typified by different types of dwellings. So you've got a variety of dwelling types and sizes, sort of establishing the different characters and also meeting the different needs of different households. So along this part of the site, you've got the denser development of flats and terraced houses, and therefore we would accordingly expect there to be a higher proportion of smaller dwellings. And if you actually look at this phase of development, as well as phases 2 and 3, those were much more typified by family housing. And if you look at what this proposal would do overall, what you'd be looking at would be 26% flats within the houses built so far, including 2-bedroom houses as well, maybe between 39% 1- and 2-bedroom houses. And actually, if you look at the target that was established at the outline stage, we were looking at 46%. So actually, there's still quite a bit of leeway in terms of small dwellings and what our expectations are for the site. And then conversely, with the 3-bedroom dwellings, we're looking currently at about 34%, whereas only 28% is expected in the sort of final mix. So I think taken within the context of phase 5 and the wider development, although the proportion of flats and small houses dwellings might seem quite high, is actually in line with what we would be expecting for this stage of the development. Moving on then to parking. The parking provision is primarily within a rear parking courtyard, accessed via the side road, and that remains the case. There is also quite a good provision of on-street unallocated parking in the immediate vicinity. You can see 6 spaces adjoining the site just on the side road, and then a further 3 along the Sutton Distributor Road. So, as approved, the courtyard would have provided 19 car parking spaces for the 8 dwellings on this site, plus 1 adjoining property. And the revised layout actually increases that by 3 to 22 spaces, and that meets the standards, both looking at this sort of small part of the scheme individually and within the wider phase. There's actually a slight over-provision of unallocated parking compared to what our parking demand calculation would suggest is necessary. And then finally, to mention drainage, the point has been raised that there might be an increase in permeable surfaces. Drainage was considered at the outline stage where a broad strategy for the site was established, and then looked at in more detail at the outline stage and conditions. The drainage officer has had a look at what's proposed now, and although there will be a marginal increase in impermeable areas, she's comfortable that it's not significant in drainage terms, and that the drainage proposal for phase 5 can be just slightly updated to address that and condition forward achieve that. Which just leads me finally on to the update, which just includes the clarification of the net gain and also an update on the approved drawings condition. But I think overall this proposed alternative to the approved reserve matters for phase 5 remains consistent with all our adopted policies and guidance, and is recommended for approval as on page 67 of the agenda onwards.
Okay, thank you, Amy. So we have 3 people registered to speak. First, could I ask for Andrew Waters from Woking Town Council? Good evening.
Yeah, Woking, the Planning and Transport Committee of Woking Town Council wishes to object to this application as it believes that changing the mix and balance of the properties within this development in this way will be detrimental to the quality of amenity for its residents. The proposal increases the percentage of apartments in this phase to over 50% and is not in keeping with the original concepts under which planning permission was granted. We believe we are supported in this argument by the adopted core strategy CP5, which states that planning permission will be granted for residential development providing a mix and balance of densities, dwelling types, tenures and sizes of property. And further in CP5, it talks about the provision of a variety of types and sizes of accommodation that are desirable, so the housing needs of many different types of households can be met. So, and the key point here is that it states that this helps to ensure the plan is sustainable in meeting the housing needs of the community. It's a firm belief of the committee on which I sit that developments of this nature do not lend themselves to the establishment of sustainable communities and run the risk of fostering a short-term let dormitory society in which no vested interest is held by the community, but by the people in the community in which they live. So I think the question, although this is a small application, the question to the committee is that what we want for our town, and should we not be nipping this type of application in the bud? Furthermore, the change in construction will create yet another large-scale building within the development, mainly flats, not houses. We believe this is contrary to CP3 of the adopted core strategy, which states that properties should be of an appropriate scale, activity and mass, should be of a high quality design, again with no detriment to the amenities of adjoining land users. We believe that this is a residential development, and in our judgment it will be. We also know that the loss of garden space in this development. We pride ourselves in our adopted core strategy in encouraging the support of fauna and flora. The green space will lose the ability to have fauna and flora within the built environment, which I very much believe is what we wanted. The point about drainage, I believe, has already been mentioned. We are concerned that the hard standing will maybe degrade the potential of drainage in the area, contrary to CP1 of the adopted strategy. So
can I ask you to summarise?
Yes. So we believe the legislation quoted underpins the arguments that Town Council have put forward, and would therefore urge the Planning Committee to reject this application. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now I'll ask Simon Packer, agent of the applicant. Good evening.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening. We note the main concerns raised relate to housing mix and the increase in the number of apartments proposed in particular. The officer's report confirms it's important not to consider this application in isolation. It should be read in the context of the wider principles already established through the outline permission and the subsequent reserve matters approved for phases 2 and 3 and the remainder of phase 5. These provide important overarching considerations in terms of broad mix, character areas and building heights density. Significantly, this application will remain consistent with all of these considerations. In terms of housing mix, the indicative mix provided at the outline stage confirmed 46% of the total number of properties will be provided as 1 and 2 bedroom units. There was no specific breakdown in terms of the proportion of apartments. In combination, the existing approved reserve matters, including this proposal, will provide for 36% of all properties of 1 and 2 beds, well below the indicative mix provided at the outline stage. Phase 6, the neighbourhood centre, will include a higher proportion of 1 and 2 bed properties that will ensure the overall mix target is closely aligned. As the officer report outlines, the overall housing mix will continue to provide a range of dwelling types and sizes, including family homes, consistent with policy. With regard to character areas, the application forms part of the Buckhurst Boulevard and Square character area identified in the approved overarching design code. Within this area, as you already heard, residential development fronting onto the SDR is expected to have a formal urban character. The provision of apartments in the form proposed will be consistent with this character and be consistent with the adjacent apartments approved as part of the original Phase 5 reserve matters. In terms of building heights density, at 3 stories, the proposals will remain consistent with the approved building heights parameters plan. Equally, the approved density parameters plan identified the area adjacent to the SDR for medium high density. Again, the proposals remain consistent with these parameters. As noted in the officer report, the proposals are also consistent with the Council's policies relating to parking, internal space standards, separation distances and provision of amenity space. On this basis, we therefore respectfully request you support your officer recommendation as set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. I now invite Councillor David Lee, who, whilst he is not the ward member for this location, he's speaking on behalf of Councillor Bob Wyatt, who is unable to attend.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As the Chairman said, I'm speaking on behalf of the Ward Councillor, Bob Wyatt, who listed this. I've handed out earlier on a sheet which shows the breakdown of the housing which you have on here. The current proposal, which was agreed previously by this committee and the officers, was for 190 units. This is now 195 units. The proposal is to reduce the 3-bedroom houses from 62 to 55, which we currently have 39% flats on this phase, and I think, yes, we can talk about the overall concept of this development, but we are considering phase 5 here, and we should not cloud the issue by looking any further. The proposal in front of you tonight will increase this to 45% flatted development, which is a reduction in much needed 3-bed family homes of 11%. In this area, we need a mix, as stated in the core strategy and the MDD, and we need family homes. I do not believe that agreeing to this change will in any way help this area to achieve what it was that we set when we carefully set the core strategy of this borough. You need to decide in these times of enormous house prices, can we afford to reduce medium-sized family homes? It was this council that confirmed the original required mix. I would also mention in paragraph 24, of your papers tonight, it sets out very clearly that not only would this lose 7 much-needed family homes with gardens, but put in their place flats with, I quote here, a small amount of amenity space. The report also states that 4 of these flats will have balconies, and I think I heard quoted on a number of occasions that this met all our guidance locally and nationally. Well, we have a design guide which requires proper amenity space, which is being ignored, along with our core strategy and MDG requirements for the housing we need and the type we need. You either want to be in control of development and what development, or leave it totally to the market. And in terms of the design guide, which I'm sure everybody is very familiar with, but our design guide is very, very clear, and it says that balconies should be provided. There should normally be enough space for 2 to 4 chairs and a small table. I can't see that. Maybe I'm missing it, or maybe it's been listed in what's been put up here today with like Juliet balconies, and it also says you can have 4, yet there are 12 flats. I find that strange that it confirms with all of the design guides and other requirements. I would, on behalf of the Ward Councillor Bob Wyatt, ask that you refuse this application on the following grounds: non-compliance with CP5 rehousing mix and TB05 of the MDD, which you were part of writing and approving, and non-compliance with our design guide, section 4. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. So that concludes the speakers for Montague Park, and throw it open to members. Bob, I think we're first to it.
Is there a local member on the committee?
No.
Thank you. Well, I'll start off by saying that I'm not going to support this application for all the reasons that David so eloquently put. But one of the reasons we're told to frequently, time and time again, that we have to assess what is before us. So I'm assessing phase 5. I'm not assessing anything else. I'm treating it as though it's a separate developer application for just one site, in which case it doesn't meet our requirements. But we have 87 flats in total proposed. How many parking spaces are there for those? The amenity space looks pretty disastrous. It's going to lead to people running around, kids running around outside, this, that and the other thing. I don't think it actually meets our requirements for the borough. We need family housing. We're trying to attract professional people, professional families into the area, or professional families will be coming into the area. I don't think this meets our requirements, and I will not be supporting it.
I do have some concerns about the mix. It's not family owned, which is what we wanted, but a mixture of smaller houses, smaller flats. I'm not quite sure how much impact it will have on the parking, but more people, smaller developments, you'll still have the same number of cars there, but there won't be an entitlement to each of them, but it won't be insufficient, will be provided, I think. Can I ask also a question? It says that there will be 3 unallocated car parking spaces, the rest are in a redesigned court. Are those unallocated ones in the rear court, or are there a road outside? Do you know?
There's a mix.
Okay. The 3 unallocated are within the courtyard.
Use the mic.
The 3 unallocated I mentioned specifically are in the courtyard, and then there is ample unallocated on the streets immediately adjoining. So there's the 6 on the side road and the 3 on the distributor road.
Right. And the other thing I want to just ask a question about, normally if you have houses, they'll have bins in the back garden and they'll take them out whatever the collection day is and stick them in the garden at the front. They'll be ordinary bins and recycling boxes, won't they? This says, it seems to be, if I'm reading correctly, it's a bulk waste bin thing with a locked up court with giant round green bins, is that right? So does that mean it's all emptied the same time as all the other bins? How often? It just looks like a very different waste system. I just need to find a paper. It's on one of these pages. Yes, I think it's page 68. There's one paragraph. It mentions they're going to have large bins of 240 or 360 litre green bins, and blue bins in a bin store. Are they going to be local to the people living in the flats, or are they going to have to carry their stuff across courtyards into the... Because the practicality of it means that it won't necessarily be as tidy and as convenient as...
I think the practicality, Malcolm, is that this is the standard arrangement that we have on all flats and apartments across the borough. There's nothing unusual about it. It's clearly it isn't the same as having your own individual dustbin that you bring round from your rear yard and put out the front of the bin there. But what you're suggesting is that this is unusually different. It's unusually different from a house.
It's a change.
It's unusually different from a house, but it's not unusual or different from what is normally provided with flats and apartments.
Will they still be emptied weekly in the normal way?
Well, it's not really a planning matter.
No, but
as far as the council has no proposal to alter its much praised weekly bin.
Thank you. I too have got questions on mix, on housing mix, the noise mitigation, and also parking. I think first on the question of mix, I wonder to what extent we're able to, what can we rely on in terms of the provision of family homes and there being 3 bedrooms? Is that, as defined in the local plan, is it strong enough for us to really insist on that? I think on the question of noise, I recall that when the Southern Distributor Road was planned, there were concerns then expressed about noise and the impact that would have on flats immediately adjacent to it. And I've been looking for some reassurance that we can actually meet the required noise standards where we've got flats right by the road. I think on the last thing on the parking is how much are we relying, the comments on tandem parking, how much are we relying on that? How much of a problem is that going to be with backing and filling, inevitably with the number of cars? Thank you.
I'm going to ask Claire to answer the first bit about the issue about the 3 bedrooms policy issues.
Thank you, Chairman. In the local plan, the policy talks about a mix. Now, I can talk about that mix can be number of bedrooms, type of accommodation. It doesn't necessarily define what that mix needs to be. In my view, and this is where we need to look at that mix, the original application was for an outline plan permission for 650 units. And within that, development normally comes forward in parcels, and obviously that's happened around all of our SDL sites. There was at that outline stage, excuse me, I've got frog in my throat, at that outline stage, there were broad parameters set out in the approved documentation, and that set out a broad mix, so what it expected, and as you've heard from many, that mix didn't actually say flats and houses, it talked about number of bedrooms within that whole outline application area, and therefore to actually identify that we can only look at a certain phase of that essentially would be against the broader principles that members have already approved in that outline application. So in respect of the outline rather than policy, I would suggest that that mix is referring more specifically to the number of bedrooms rather than the actual type of accommodation in terms of flats, houses or whatever.
Can I come back on that? Because I think that there's a concern there that on the one hand we're looking at an individual application, on the other hand we're looking at a number of applications. Now there's a danger that we say, well, overall it can meet the requirements, but then if we look at, say, the last application in this block, what is to stop a developer saying, well, you've got to judge this development on its own merits, and suddenly we're left with a deficit? Well, there seems a danger, this mix between per site or per development in total.
I think you'd probably be fair to say that works both ways for us, because, for instance, with the last development, Crest development, in Barkham, where there's a number of conventional family homes and apartments, if you chose to look at just a subset of some of the apartments, clearly the housing density and number of bedrooms and things would look very different and might not appear to be policy compliant. But we're looking at the site as a whole. I guess what you've got to look at is, to take your point, that it is a specific part of the site. The application and permission that we gave was for 650 units, and what we're talking about here is a change which would certainly change the mix to a slight extent on the 650, but on against the 650 it's a very small number. And
Yeah.
you know, I think you've got to, there are two ways of looking at it. You look at it as a whole, which I think is probably the correct way of looking at it, or you can subdivide it right down to a smaller detail, and you'll probably find any single part of this site might appear not to be policy compliant if you break it into really small enough areas. But you've got to look at the whole. But that's a personal view. You may have different feelings. Is there any other points you want to cover?
It was just that question of noise and
the tandem parking. So could we, any response on the noise? Because obviously the presence of London Road was a significant factor when we looked at the mix and where they would be located.
Yes, noise was looked at the outline stage and also through conditions and the original reserve matters, and the principles and measures that were agreed then would be applicable to this development as well, so it's something that's already been looked at and dealt with.
So we are confident we can meet the required noise standards?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And Chris, could you comment on the issue about tandem parking?
Yeah. Yeah, in terms of the tandem parking, it's not shared tandem parking, so the tandem parking is allocated. Sorry. So in terms of the parking, yeah, there's it's not a shared. So tandem parking isn't shared with two flats, for example. It's allocated. So the tandem parking spaces are allocated. So there's 4 sets of tandem parking, one obviously for the house, and then there's 3 other sets, G1, G3, and G4, which are part of the flat development, which are, is that good? Yeah, they're here. These ones. Yeah, so here, so you've basically this house here has parking, these 2 here, then you've got this unit above which has the 2 on the road, and then obviously these 2 here for the flats. The rest of them through here are unallocated flat development, which is very similar to what's obviously happened for other developments, and I think another scheme is coming forward in a little while. And then there's 3 unallocated stroke visitor spaces also located within this area, as well as 6 on the front road, 3 down here as well. So there's a very good mix of parking in the area, and when we've done the calculation for that parcel on its own, as well as for phase 5, they both come in turn in line with the council standards.
Can I just come back on that? So we're not going to have back and fill on a major road?
No. That's so here. It's in the courtyard here, or up here, which is the side road. The SDR runs along there. There's no access.
Fine. Thank you.
Rochelle, next.
I'm also disturbed by the fact that replacing family dwellings with amenities would most likely buy-to-let flats. I don't know about you, but every place I'm canvassing the last couple of years, when I come to flats, I look at the list and say, oh, they're not living here anymore. Oh, they're not living here anymore. It's just very transient. And I think it changes the character of the area and the character of the town by having so much transient people rather than having permanent families who live there. And it changes the neighborhood in general. I'm also worried that we're also setting a precedent that our final applications don't seem to be final applications. Reserved matter seems to be, oh well, we may change it somewhere in the future. And I think that reserved matter should be the way that it actually is.
I'm a little surprised about your comment about family homes, because on your last application you were talking about concerns that too many people, too many children were stuck living at home with more cars, and I would have thought providing apartments might give them an opportunity to get on the housing ladder, but they probably couldn't necessarily afford family homes, but maybe I misunderstood you.
Most likely these will be buy-to-let flats more than anything else. I doubt there will probably be any individuals who will be able to afford them otherwise.
Okay, thank you. Chris Barron?
Some people have been saying that we should consider this application on its own, but we can't quite do that. There is no outline application for this area of the SDL. This reserve matters application is directly connected to the outline application, which has approval for 650. So it has to be seen in that context. I think if we refuse it and go to appeal, the applicant could easily say, well, we have lost 7 3-bedroom houses, but we intend to increase the number of 3-bedroom houses in phases 6 and 7. Thus rectifying the problem. I don't think we can refuse through a really minor change to one of the 7 phases, because we don't know it won't be corrected later. I mean, I don't quite know how this works, but I would have thought when we come to the last phase, sub-phase 7, if the housing mix doesn't match the outline application, then we would have reason to refuse, because that would be the end of it. But at this stage, there's still 2 sub-phases to go. And if we don't have the amendment here, they can be corrected later.
All right, John?
Thank you, Chairman. A lot of the things I was going to say, obviously, have already been said. But when we devised this SDL as a council, a key cornerstone was building communities. And obviously, there is no question about it, we're seeing more and more of our developments being taken up by rental properties, people seeing it as a form of income. Now, I know that's not a planning issue, but it is something we need to be aware of. I think I agree with Chris as well. It would be very difficult to refuse this on that basis, because we don't know what they're going to build in the last phase, and then it's the outline of 650. But I would caution these sort of changes and would suggest to officers wherever they can resist it before it gets to this stage that they do. It is only an additional 3 houses, 4 houses that we cost, so 5 houses. And my question would be to the developer, would be why?
And obviously, as I said in my introduction of committee meeting, it's not for us to. We have to consider valid planning applications. This is a valid planning application. Clearly, some members are not supportive of it. But at the end of the day, it's not for us to say this is a good or bad idea. We've got to apply planning policy, not be concerned as to whether these properties are going to be lived in by families, buy-to-let, or anybody else. So, okay.
I would just urge officers when they are negotiating.
I'm sure from the comments made by a number of members of the committee, Claire and her team will acknowledge that. Wayne?
Yeah, just to build on the point that you mentioned and to support Chris's point, if we agree to outline, I wasn't around at the time, if you agree to outline 650 and you agree a certain mix, surely if you agree this tonight, you've taken up certain percentages of the 1 and 2 bedrooms, so that as the latter stages come along, the 6 and 7s, etc., you'll just be a lower factor on the 1 and 2 bedrooms and a higher factor on the 3 and 4 and 5 bedrooms, etc. Couldn't we just put that as a condition that we're agreeing it based on the numbers, but as the percentage in the future, you need to start increasing the family homes?
That's fine. I think everybody. Tim, did you? Okay. I think everybody's had an opportunity to speak. Sorry, apologies. Everybody's had an opportunity to speak. A number of members are clearly not supportive of this. Do any one of those members wish to come forward with an alternative proposal?
I'll stick my head above the parapet and agree with the reasons that Bob White's given for refusal of non-compliance with CP5, with the housing mix and TBO 50 MDD, and non-compliance with our design guide section 4. Because I think the amenity spaces are housing. There's no balconies, which we were insisting on. I'm not happy with it.
So non-compliance with CP5 and issues about the design guide section 4 amenity space. Yeah. Okay, so I was just going to ask if someone prepared to second that proposal. Okay, so we have a valid alternative proposal in front of us, which is contrary to the officer's recommendation. Could all those members who wish to support that please indicate? Three members. So I'm afraid, I have to say, who doesn't support it? Okay, so I'm afraid that proposal fails, which leaves us for the substantive item, which is to take the application in front of us with the recommendations is there. But no doubt, I hope that since the present the applicant's agent could perhaps take members' concerns back to the developer and ask that they should be cognizant of that with further applications they bring forward. So on that basis then, could members please indicate whether they're prepared to support the recommendation to approve this? And That's approved by 6, and those against? So that is approved. Thank you. Anybody wants to leave from that one, and we'll move on with taking the Finchipstead application next. As I said, this is where we just change the order of the consider the Finchipstead one next, because we have a number of members of the public here for that. So Katie, that would be you, I think. Okay. Just a couple of points to make on this, that the members attended a site visit 8 o'clock on Friday morning of last week, and as I say, had a look at the site and saw the site of the previous building, and were able to see the building in relation to the neighbouring property, which is the coach house and the apartments and the court itself. So members have some, most members, not all members were able to take, but most members have some familiarity with the site. And for the residents who've come along, obviously just thank you for your forbearance and waiting, but as you see, we have to take this in sequence. Some will be dispatched very quickly, some take some while. So Katie, straight across to you.
Thank you, Chair. The application site is the Lodge, Norton from Chancery. The application before the committee is for full permission for the erection of a 4-bedroom dwelling with associated parking and landscaping following the demolition of the original dwelling. The site lies within a gated area called North Court, and it is understood that the former building had been a lodge for the former North Court house. The site is located within the countryside in the parish of Finchipstead. Members visited the site on Friday morning, but for context, the site is located close to the entrance of North Court. The replacement dwelling will be located on a raised area of land, as did the original dwelling. There is a TPO tree to the south of the site that will be located close to the proposed dwelling. This is the view from the site to the east. Note that the house on the slide is located on the left branch. This is the view from the site towards the west. This application was invited by the planning enforcement team for a following the demolition of the original building, the Lodge. It is understood that the demolition of the building was the result of issues had during works to implement a permission granted in 2014 for the partial demolition and extension of the lodge. The intention of the agent is to achieve planning permission for a replacement dwelling that is the same as that approved in 2014 in terms of height, massing and lighting. The proposal was submitted with the same drawings as those submitted and approved in the 2014 consent. However, concerns were raised about the accuracy of the proposed and original submitted plans, particularly in terms of height and a lack of detail. The revised plans as presented today include the measuring of the original dwelling, revised detailed proposed elevations, site and floor plans, and a topographic survey. The intent is to achieve the same building height and massing as that approved in 2014. Following consultation, residents submitted concerns regarding the withdrawn height of the original now demolished dwelling, arguing that its height was 4.4 metres rather than the 5.5 metres as submitted. However, as the building no longer exists and that there was no measured survey of the original building, our assessment can only be based on the best available information. As such, attention should be focused upon the impact of the proposed dwelling. In terms of the proposal itself, the proposed replacement dwelling is similar to that approved in 2014. Here are the front and rear elevations compared to the permission, the plans and granted in 2014. And here are the side elevations. The proposed replacement dwelling is similar in its massing to that approved in 2014. This table has been included in the members' update, page 8. It shows that the proposed volume of floor space is similar. The increased massing between the original and 2014 application was justified in the officer's report in the 2014 application. This is partly due to a fallback decision for large extensions achieved under permitted development. The increase in height was also approved under the 2014 application. The replacement building would also be situated in the same position as the original dwelling. This plan is included at the back of the members' update. The proposal would also replicate the details of the original dwelling, including those parts sought to be retained under the 2014 application. This includes materials, brick courses, and the details of window arches. To round up, as the building can no longer, as the original building no longer exists, and that no survey was carried of the original dwelling, an assessment can only be made based on the best available information with regards to its original height. Attention should be had to the impact of the proposed building. The proposed building would be in the same location as the former lodge and would replicate the form and detailing of the original dwelling, including those parts that were approved to be retained under the 2014 application. As such, it is considered that this is a significant material consideration. Given that there is limited variation in the design and scale of the dwelling, it is considered that this allows the application to be recommended for approval.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we've got 3 speakers for this, and the Parish Council has asked to speak last, so we'll take in the first instance Objector Francis Jones. Do you have a presentation? You've got an assistant, have you?
Yeah. As a spokesperson for the residents of Northport, we would like to strongly object to this proposed planning application on the following grounds. It is not subservient to the location. The sheer size, scale and volume of the proposed building is totally out of keeping with the rest of Northport and will dominate and overpower the entrance. The new lodge will be built on top of a bank 7 feet higher than the driveway, making it appear even taller. The overall lodge will have a footprint 6 times greater than that of the original property. It should be noted that all developments in the past 20 years in Northport have been built within the original footprints of the historic, with historic ridge heights retained. The information provided by the developer relating to the demolished lodge is incorrect. The original ridge height was 15 feet, not 18 feet. The developer stated the original footprint was 107 square metres, which is even inconsistent with their plan drawing. The increase in the volume of the proposed building above ground compared to the original lodge is 170%, using the correct 15 feet ridge height, far exceeding Woking Borough Council's planning guidelines. This application is not identical to the planning application, as the ridge height has been pushed up by nearly 30% from 15 feet to 19 feet forward. Woking Borough Council's Chief Planning Officer even stated he would refuse this application if the original ridge height was deemed to be 15 feet. You will clearly see from the slide above the huge increase in the size and volume of the property, the original lodge being dwarfed. Please note this has been accurately scaled. As you see, all the windows and doors of the original lodge align with the developer's own drawings. It is evident from the photo that the 18 feet ridge height claimed by the developer is incorrect, and the effect of the slope of the lodge sits on means that the drive to chimney height is 32 feet. The evidence of the ridge height is based on a simple photograph of the ridge with my mother-in-law holding a 60 centimetre rule to the picture to be scaled. This is the best and only evidence that holds up to scrutiny. For presentation purposes, we've imported the picture into a professional drawing package, AutoCAD, have a print in the picture and measuring with the ruler using the 60 centimetre rule in the picture as a scale clearly demonstrate that the lodge was 15, not 18 feet as claimed by the developer. As I said, my mother-in-law here is 5 feet 1. The developer's claims, if the developer's claims were true, that she would have to be 6 foot tall. We can't understand why this compelling information is being ignored by Woking and Borough Council planners, and the developer's flaky calculations accepted based on brick courses, which are not a measuring device, unlike the 60 centimetre rule in our residential picture. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Jim Bailey, agent of the applicant.
Thank you, Chairman. As explained in the officer's report, the applicant started work on our previous consent for extensions, which included demolition of all but the front wall of the building. Unfortunately, this wall collapsed during construction, and in April this application, one for you today, was submitted for a replacement dwelling of exactly the same dimensions and design. Identical plans to those previously approved were submitted and validated by the council. However, the planning officer contacted the applicant and stated that there were concerns about the accuracy of the plans. At this point, the architects and myself were instructed, and the architects then produced a new set of plans which were submitted to the council. The planning officer has asked after that for more information, including a topographical survey, confirmation of original building dimensions, additional detail on the proposed plans, and samples of materials, all of which we have provided. The scheme now before you has been subject to close scrutiny by planning officers, and we have submitted a considerable amount of information over a number of months in order to satisfy them that it works in planning terms. We understand the concerns of residents regarding the size of the replacement dwelling, but we can only reiterate what is said in the officer's report. Although the new 4-bedroom dwelling will be larger than the original, the height, floor area and volume of the proposal is exactly the same as both schemes previously approved by the council. In order to minimise the visual impact of the proposal, substantial elements of the new dwelling will be underground in the basement as well as in the roof space. The original dwelling was 5.4 metres high, and the new dwelling will be 5.9 metres high, which is an increase of only 500 millimetres. The dwelling will be of modest height compared to the nearest residential properties, which are all at least 8 metres in height. There will be no loss of amenity for neighbours, as they will all be sited at least 23 metres from the dwelling. The proposal will not harm the character or appearance of the area, as high quality materials and landscaping will be used. Features and design characteristics of the original building will be retained to ensure that the building blends into its surroundings. There are 2 large trees on the site which will be retained and protected during the development. And covenants have been mentioned, but these are a civil matter and not relevant to the consideration of planning applications. Overall, we consider that the application is acceptable in planning terms, and we request that the committee should approve the application as recommended in the officer's report.
Okay, thank you very much. And finally, Roger Marshall Say from Winchester Parish Council.
Mr Chairman, members of the committee, last week Winchester Parish Council Planning Committee considered this application, and that we have objected to it on the following basis. The basis actually included in the members' update. The original ridge height is in dispute. We have seen evidence that indicates the original height was 15 feet, making the proposed development more imposing and out of character when compared with the original Victorian house. Proposed development is unsympathetic to the existing environment, and the substantial increase in volume will be inappropriate on this plot. We believe that the Town Officer's recommendation is based on a false premise, and that's been very eloquently described by Frances Jones in her presentation, relating to the height of the original house. It seems to me that the only valid evidence of the height of the original house is provided in the information that Francis showed you, which is scaling from an accurately calibrated ruler. The developer has put forward, I think, a rather spurious case of measuring bricks and mortar, but they're taking as their base reference for that the building beneath the damp course, which appears to be substantially different, particularly the thickness of the mortar, to the remainder of the structure. It's interesting that we have a restrictive covenant on the site, which limits any development under the covenant, was raised with the planning issue, to 15 feet. You might ask yourself, why 15 feet? Was the original development subject to that covenant, or when the covenant was written, was it bearing in mind that the existing structure, the lodge, the Victorian lodge, was 15 feet high? This covenant seems to support very strongly the case that the old lodge was only 15 feet high. The new building is 5.9 meters high, or the proposed building is 5.9 meters high, which is 1.3 meters higher than the original lodge, or a measurement I prefer, 4 foot 3 inches. The second element of the false premise is the relationship of the current application to the application 2140168, which has been referred to. The author says that it is similar, if not identical, in size and volume, this new application, to that one. Given the gross increase in height, this is clearly not the case. And I would ask you to reject this application on the grounds it's not in accordance with CP11 of the Council's core strategy, which says development in the countryside relating to replacement dwellings must not lead to an inappropriate increase in scale, form and footprint of the original dwelling. Okay. This clearly does.
Thank you. Right, members, I'll talk first on this one. I'm the board member, so I'll certainly talk about it. A couple of questions, really. Could we just get confirmation what our guideline increase is really permissible on replacement dwellings in the countryside?
So within Borough Design Guidance CP11, it's 50%.
50%. And could you confirm what the proposed increase is in this application? I assume it's the information on the update sheet, which is 97.8%.
Yes, so that's excluding the basement.
Okay. We are obliged to exclude the basement, I believe, because that is really, as below ground, it's not really a planning matter. Okay, but if the basement was included, the council's figure suggests an increase in volume of 193%. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The other thing is, I'm just a little concerned that clearly we have quite different views here from the applicant's agent and from the residents there as to the difference in height. And personally, the fact that the original covenant was in place and that dwelling was there at that time, it would suggest to me that whilst the covenant is not a planning matter, and we would not normally consider a covenant, I would think it provides quite compelling evidence that the dwelling was indeed 15 feet high, not at the height indications that we have. The other matter I just wanted to check is application 201-40168. There's a lot of references to that. Can we confirm whether that application is able to be built?
This is the, sorry, 201-401 demolition.
Yeah.
I'll just read it so I can clarify what it is,
Okay.
if that's okay. So, demolition of the existing rear extension, erection of the rear and side extension, conversion of loft space to habitable room, creation of underground garage, storeroom with associated parking. Chairman, that can't be because there's no dwelling there to extend.
Okay, thank you. So really, application 201-40168 is quite irrelevant because it's no longer. You don't agree?
I don't agree with
You
that.
think it is relevant?
Yes,
Right.
Chairman, I do think it's relevant. I think if we were, as we have to look at the previous planning history, I think in terms of its physical structure it can't be built because there's no existing dwelling, as I've explained. However, the council needs to demonstrate that it's consistent in its approach. If it has previously approved an application that is very, very similar in its form, scale and so on to a application that's before it today, my view is if that previous approval is a significant material planning consideration, and in the event that we refused that application because they felt that the previous approval was unacceptable, that would hold limited weight as appeal.
Okay. And would you think that if the well, let's hear from some other people first. So, right, other members wishing to speak. Who's first? Chris on.
We're discussing, the whole discussion seems to be based on what was there before. I don't see in the report an indication whether the case officer believes that simply what is proposed now, as if it were a new dwelling, whether that's acceptable. If all the history was blank, this is just a new building being proposed, would the case officer approve it?
I guess what they're saying is that it's very similar to the previous application, so I think the case officer is saying yes, they would approve it. That's what I've heard.
They approve it?
I think that's what the case officer is saying.
Well then, the history is relevant then.
What, again, Chairman, trying to explain, the original application, from the stop me if you think I'm saying anything that's technically or in historical terms is not exactly correct, but my understanding is that what happened is originally an application was submitted and it was, in officers' view, unacceptable because it was too large. What then subsequently happened is the applicant put forward a certificate of lawfulness, and what that demonstrated is that they could undertake a significant amount of development without needing planning permission because it would be permitted development. That was approved. They then used that in order to then be a consideration in a further application for an extension. And in officers' view, they had to look at that fallback legal position of what could and couldn't be approved on the site, be developed on the site without needing planning permission. As a result, that application was approved. I think that the previous refusal of something relatively similar is a demonstration that without having that fallback position, officers would have thought that that proposal was on the large side and too big in accordance with policy. However, at the time, we had to give the adequate weight to what was lawful. So that's the history, and I think that unfortunately, if people know what the system and how to use the system, then they can use the PD rights and what can and can't be done as a justification for allowing something else on the site. So in response to the question that we've now got, we have approved something on this site. In my view, that what has been now proposed is similar. I'm not sure if it's exactly the same because of the plans and the challenges that we've received from the neighbours and the residents, and the fact that it's not there, so we don't honestly know. But in my view, looking at the plans, and you've seen the plans, there is reference in the presentation to the existing plans, to the previous planning on the previous application and to those on the current application. They are not significantly different, in my view, to come to a different conclusion than what we did on the previous application. And I feel that if we ended up with that in front of a planning inspector, I think the planning inspector would come down to the same view as I've just put before you now. I don't necessarily think that I like it in the sense that it complies with policy. It's a personal, my judgment is, yes, demonstrated by that 2013 application, the proposal was considered by officers to be too large. However, we have to consider all the material planning considerations, and that's what the advice is that I've given you tonight.
Okay, I think one of the differences, maybe Claire's, I would like to perhaps apply more weight to, is the fact that I think even the council acknowledged that the original form that was submitted with F2014-0167 were frankly, with the benefit of hindsight, not the sort of plans that should have been accepted. They were hand-drawn, they were not clearly dimensioned. So whilst I accept that what's being put forward is very similar to what was approved, it doesn't necessarily mean the basis on which the original one was approved was sound.
I think, can you just go back to that, Katie? I think that what those plans did do, Chairman, is they did allow us to, with using the existing dwelling, which is no longer there, they did allow us to identify clearly the proportions of the extension because we would have been able to use the existing dwelling. They're not great plans, completely accept that. It's difficult to justify refusing to accept plans because you have to show that you can't identify what is being proposed as a result. And I think that given the existence of the existing structure, then we would have had difficulty with that. I think now we've got a position where we've got those plans and we're trying to work out what really was there, which makes it significantly more difficult.
Chris, did you want to come back on your first point?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Who's next? Bob?
Yeah, I have great concerns about this. I think I'm minded to accept the demonstration of the previous height from Mrs. Jones and her very eloquent mother-in-law, who struck a lovely pose there with it. I think I would take that as strong evidence and over and above a guesswork that we seem to be applying from the planning department. I was looking at the 168 was originally a demolition of existing rear extension, etc., etc. And then there was an application for a non-material amendment to planning consent to allow the partial demolition and reconstruction of the original building. It was interesting that the agent said that it was the front wall was left and it fell down. Well, I'd employ some new structural engineers or builders if I was a person doing that, because it shouldn't fall down. I will make no comment whether it did it of its own volition or what, but I'm not happy with this application. I think it's significantly over and above the original area. I think if I'd have been sitting in 2014, I wouldn't have approved that application either. I'm not minded to support it.
I'm assuming that the officers actually went out and looked at the site, even though it was permitted development, and actually had an idea of whether this was real or not. And they can tell the difference between 5 meters and 7 meters. When you were measuring the original development, it was permitted development, didn't somebody actually walk out to the site, drive out to the site, look at it, say, yes, that makes sense?
All applications that we receive, whether they be certificates or all full applications, are a site visit is undertaken. But I think you probably misunderstood where I've mentioned the 5 metres and the whatever. I think, you know, the certificate of lawfulness was based upon whether or not something could be developed without needing planning permission. The assessment, when the subsequent application was received in 2014, there would have been a site visit, and an officer would have gone on site. They would have looked at the plans that we've seen, the more simple plans, the lined plans, the ones that were less professionally produced, and then they would have made a judgment as to whether or not they felt they accurately represented what was there at that time.
So they could actually know whether it was 5.5 meters or 15
They wouldn't have measured
feet.
it. We have to take information on whether or not we feel that it's accurate from an assessment. But we don't go out and measure every single planning application to make sure it's exactly in accordance with the plans. We have an idea. I mean, I could look at a building, for example, and come to a conclusion as to whether or not I think that somebody's trying to misrepresent or had there is a mistake. But, you know, we don't measure it to be exact. And also the other thing that's interesting to take on board is that when we look at the plans, we would usually give a little bit of leeway for lines on a paper, you know, because normally we give about 25 to 30 centimetres for the thickness of a line on a paper, because you can never get everything absolutely accurate. And things are reproduced, and then, you know, they potentially lead to small and incremental changes.
I'm quite surprised in a way, Claire, that I take your point that you have to make allowances in plans. What about the photograph? Could we put that photograph up, please?
Which photograph?
It's the photograph of the lady holding the rule. Because clearly there are, you know, I don't think anyone around this table will be in any doubt that there is some discrepancies on the plans and we don't know which way it is. But looking at that and looking at the scaling, would you just mind standing up? Sorry, unorthodox or thank you. Clearly the lady isn't as this would imply 6 feet tall. But personally, you know, compared with plans, and as you say, accuracy on plans, the thickness of a line can equate to about 30 centimetres. Looking at that, I think it's somewhat contrary to that, but let's see what other members have to say. Thank you very much.
Again, though, somebody would have looked at it and they'd never tell almost a meter difference. Did from 4,600 centimeters to 5,500 centimeters. I'm sure that a planning officer can tell that difference between that amount. 25 centimeters, perhaps not. But a meter is something that they probably won't get wrong if they're looking at it.
Right, John.
Thank you, Chairman. I didn't go on site visit, so I have to declare I don't. It's difficult for me to look at it in the setting. I have a couple of questions, though. It would seem that application 2014-0168 and the proposed, it's very clever. They've really got to within the 0.3 if you look at the measurements. Now, that leads me to ask the question, what was the roof height of the original application? Because if it's got the same space, and we're talking about building in the roof, that 3 foot I would have thought made some difference to it. So I'd like to know what the roof height was of the previous application.
Well, the see, because that's not the subject application, I'm not sure whether we have that.
It's in the members' update.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, can I submit evidence on that, please?
No, I don't think you can, sorry. If you could just show us where it is in
No, sorry, it's not on the slide. Apologies.
It's on the slide.
Yeah.
Okay, can I? Oh, you've got it there. You do. There it is. 5.5. The problem it gives me, Chairman, is if we've approved an application of exactly the same space, almost exactly the same height, I cannot see how we can refuse this application.
I think the issue relates to the doubt that has been cast upon the accuracy of the plans on which that was approved. And that's obviously something that the members of the committee are going to have to make up their own minds on.
But it has been approved. It was approved with that size.
It was approved and it can't be built.
Yes. But it was approved and...
Yeah, fine.
Can I just, one other question? So I don't know the second. It was said that other houses in the locality roof height is considerably more.
The apartment block is a three-storey block, and so based upon the original Victorian property that burned down, and the other building behind Coach House, which I understand is, whilst it's redeveloped to the same height as the original dwelling, which wasn't subject to covenant. And obviously the other factor that may have some bearing on it is, as those who came on the site visit saw, the site is a mound. So it's built on the top of the mound, which has an effect of exaggerating the height in the set.
So that's the mansion building. And then there's another one, we saw another one. What's that one? Is that the neighbour?
That's the neighbouring property.
So that's the neighbouring property.
So you see the land falls away. Right, Tim.
Thank you. If this was a brand new application, I would have absolutely no problems turning it down. It'd be pretty straightforward. I think, as other members have said, and particularly John last, that with the PD rights on the original building, I am struggling to see a reason how we can refuse this. We are coming down to just a difference of opinion on the heights, and then if we go on the worst scenario, we've got to decide, is that extra height harmful? The gap or the distance between the other developments is significant. It's way over the design guidelines. So even if it is that extra 50 centimetres or a metre, I'm struggling to find a reason to turn it down.
Okay, thank you, Tim. I think perhaps we're getting understandably fixated on the height. I think the initial point I made was that our normal guideline for dwellings in the countryside is 50% increase, and the council's own figures say this is a 97.8% increase. Now, we've often had increases that are a small percentage above, and I would also acknowledge that the host dwelling is quite small, which often allows us to go for something slightly more. But it's a question of whether you feel that double an increase in volume is appropriate. John?
I would just say, Chairman, if the wall hadn't fallen down, you'd have got this.
Okay. Right, Wayne?
Chair, question for Claire. On a technicality, going back to Simon's point, that's not there anymore. They only got permission based on PD on an existing building. That's gone away. This is a new dwelling.
Yeah. So there is I think there's a practical way to look at it, and there's a planet way to look at it. So practically, they can't build anything at the moment because they've got no planning permission, they've got no house there. However, The scenario essentially is that, say, members felt that it was not acceptable and they wanted to refuse it, they would go to an appeal. And in my view, an appeal inspector would look at what was there previously, and that they would give that really significant weight. That would hold more weight than probably anything else, in my view. And then what they would have to do, and I think that, what members have to do is they have to look at the difference. Even if you take a worst case scenario between what the applicant's saying and what the neighbours and the residents are saying, but then you have to look at whether or not what was previously there and previously approved, what is now being shown on the proposed plans, is that significantly more harmful than even the worst case scenario? And that to my mind is what an inspector would do. In my opinion, I feel that there's an inspector would give almost undoubtedly grant planning permission for the extension as before you tonight. But again, going back to the original point, no, they can't build it.
Michelle, you want to come back?
Claire, how much will this cost the taxpayers to defend this? And how much will it probably cost us as far as the client's costs as well that we'll have to pay?
It's difficult
I
to
guess.
say as much.
£100,000.
Well, it would probably be a written representation of the application.
I don't think it's planned.
50,000.
Okay. I don't know. I couldn't say. So a few £1,000. And there is obviously the cost potential.
Yeah, just looking at those numbers again. I mean, I think the comment that 15 foot it was said was the height of the building.
It's two very different.
Well, if you look at that, the original was 15.5 metres, which in old money is about 15 feet. So there's no disagreement, and there was no disagreement at that time, that it had gone from 15 feet to 5.8, 5.9 metres. So that's the problem I'm wrestling with at the moment. I don't think there's any disagreement with the lady standing in front of it. I think that number confirms the height of that building. At the time that planning application was given, before the wall fell down, it was 15 foot.
Am I allowed to sit down?
Frank, sorry. Does anybody else wish to speak? I'm going to make a proposal that this is refused. I just test whether there's support for that. And I'll make my reason very simple and straightforward. I'll say that it's an increase in scale, height and volume, contrary to CP11, which is supposed to be an increase in scale, height and volume, which reflects the locality, and also because it's double the increase in our guideline for replacement dwellings in the countryside of 50%. So I think those are the two salient reasons. I want to test that to see whether there's support. So is there anyone prepared to support that proposal? Right, okay, so we have a valid proposal to refuse this application based on it being contrary to CP11 and also because of the increase in increase in volume or scale and mass and volume of the building being significantly greater than the guideline of 50% of 98%. Yes, you wish to give some advice?
Well, only to ask, is that arguable without a cost, without a high risk of cost? Is that something the planning officers can professionally argue and support on?
I think as I mentioned, Mary, in my view, because of the background of the planning history, I feel that a refusal on that basis would be difficult to substantiate. That's my professional view.
I think the question is, are you saying is it unreasonable?
That's essentially what it's going to be. If a professional planning officer can't argue those, then you have there a bit of a risk.
Mary, I'd be very disappointed if one of our planning officers could not argue that a dwelling at 98% increase in volume was not in accordance with our guideline of 50%.
It was a
that
genuine
seems pretty
question.
straightforward.
It was a genuine question because I'm not a planning officer.
Yeah. Okay. John?
I agree with you, but I think we shot ourselves in the foot a long time ago, a year ago, to be exact.
Yeah, and my point is that
Second bite of the cherry.
my point to that is subsequent to that, other information has come forward in terms of the dimensions, which I think throws into doubt the information on which that original decision was based on. So anyway, we have a valid proposal. I'm not sure it's going to get support, but we will put it to the vote. So those who wish to support the alternative proposal I've put forward could then please indicate. That is 3, and those against. So I'm afraid my attempt to get this refused on those grounds fails, which means we have to go to the substantive application which is in front of us, which is to approve the application. Could those members wishing to approve please indicate. So that is carried by 6 votes to 3. Sorry, well, those against, Chris, I assume you were still against, so that is carried by 6 votes to 3. So that is approved. Okay, we now move on to the item that we skipped over on this, which is the standard life application at Sutton's Park. Sorry, we'll just wait for people to leave. Members, order please. So we now have a planning application that Graham's going to present, which is Sutton's Park in Reading. Just to draw your attention, there are no objections, no comments from town or parish councils or for local ward members on this. So straight across to you, Graham.
Thank you, Chairman. The application is for the redevelopment of the site to create a B2 use building with ancillary offices, parking and storage. This would comprise of the main large building and a smaller store building. The site is located in a major development early and is on Sutton's Business Park. This is a well-established park and is a core employment area in the development plan. The site plan shows the main building in the middle of the site with the storage building to the north. Parking will be located to the edge of the site and the access will be moved slightly north with one other access stopped up. These are the original buildings on the left. And then looking into the site, you can see a bank of trees and the parking outside the buildings. This is from the main road through Sutton's Business Park, and you can see the last section of the A3290 on the bridge to the right. The units have since been demolished, and you can see the scale of the site and the buildings beyond. And looking to the right, you can also see in the middle of the picture in the background the top of the brakes building. The application is considered acceptable in principle as it would lead to an increase in BU's floor space in the core employment area. Although there is a change from a start-up type building, marketing for the units has yielded very little interest. Although the building would be larger, it's not out of keeping with the character of the area, which is for typical industrial park design. Views would not be possible around the proposed building, but this is similar to other buildings on the park which occupy the centre of the site. Ultimately, the scale of the building and the materials to be used would be appropriate in this location. Parking provision is acceptable, and there will be replacement for the trees that have been lost through a landscaping plan. The building would achieve very good BREEAM status, and no other issues are raised subject to conditions. In the members' update, there is clarification of the fact that the nature of the chemicals to be stored does not require planning permission, and in any case there is other legislation in place which relates to this. There is also an indication of the footprint increase, which you will see is very high. Again, this is not considered to be out of keeping with the area. Indeed, the brakes building, which you can see in the middle of that picture, is actually larger than the proposal site. There is also one additional condition to ensure that the storage building remains as ancillary. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Graham. Despite the scale and size of this application, I think it's not particularly controversial. Members Chris and then Risha.
Thank you. Just one concern really about, because I did work actually very close to this at one time, and I'm just concerned about access. Can you clarify which is the main road with the traffic going through Sutton's there, and where the access is? I'm not sure I've understood that at all. Is that off the side road in fact? Sorry.
Looking at this plan, the road which is to the bottom, which is essentially cut off from the plan, is the main road through Sutton's Business Park. You would then turn right into the side road, which carries on up north and goes around to the back. The access would be off that side road there.
Off the side road?
Yeah.
So just to clarify, there's no change then, in fact, of the access onto the road that carries the bulk of traffic?
No, there isn't.
It's off that road. Fine, thanks very much.
I'd just like to say the error here says Sutton's Business Park, Reading. Early, to the best of my knowledge, is not part of Reading, it's part of Woking, and I'd like to please change that as well. Because people in early seem to think they live in Reading, but they don't.
I think actually it's his postal address. That's the issue. I have parts of my ward in Finchley whose postal address is Hook, Basingstoke, Hampshire. And they're very upset about that because they're wholly within the parish of Finchley.
It clearly says parish of Early on the front page.
I know that, but it says the location isn't Reading. What it says.
Winter Castle has a slide postcode and the Queen not very far away.
Okay, members, clearly, as I say, it's a major proposal, but it's in the right location and it's sort of got clear, unequivocal support from the planning officers, so would you please indicate whether you're willing to support. And that is carried. Thank you. Now move on to the final application, which is the Norton Road site. Members attended site visit last Friday morning and saw the location, familiar with it. And Graham, I think you're going to take us through this one as well. So we move straight on to that, and we just have one person here to speak.
So the application is for the erection of a block of 6 flats and 3 terrace houses following the demolition of the existing industrial unit. The site is in the major development location of Woking at the end of Norton Road, which is accessed from the Carnival Pool roundabout. It's bordered on all sides by residential properties. The proposal includes parking to the front, access from Norton Road, and the 2 buildings for houses and flats. Meaty space is provided to the rear, and the trees at the south boundary will be retained, whilst the trees in the middle of the site will be removed. Members will recall the site visit on Friday, and the trees in the middle of the site there, as indicated on the photo. It's also just to show the proximity of other residential properties with mutual overlooking between them. And also part of the industrial unit that's on the site. The proposal is considered acceptable in principle, given that it is an allocated site in the MDD local plan for around 7 units. Whilst the proposal is for 9 units, it is considered no harm arises from providing this number. Due to the demolition of the industrial units, there would be a loss of BU's floor space. However, given the allocation of the site in the development plan and the previous outline approval for housing in 2012, the loss of this is considered acceptable. The area is residential in character, with the existing industrial unit being out of keeping with this. Norton Road itself generally has terraces and blocks of residential units with communal parking areas, and therefore the scheme would continue this theme. It's also considered the materials would be in keeping with other properties in the area. Overlooking distances are met for properties on Norton Road, Carey Road and Gypsy Lane. In terms of the flats at Kendrick Road, the windows facing the development are generally serving non-habitable rooms or are secondary windows to rooms. There are 2 bedroom windows at first floor which would be set at a slight angle to the development. Whilst there is a level difference, the distance on average meets 22 metres, and it's considered, given the mutual overlooking in the area, it would not be possible to substantiate harm on this point. Contamination is a known issue from the previous application, and an update to the report submitted in 2012 has been provided, outlining that little has changed. Given this, it is considered necessary to include the same conditions that were approved for the outline permission. In the members' update, there is further clarification on internal space standards. Although they are not met for the higher occupancy level, this is not considered to be harmful. In any case, the provision of affordable housing is considered to outweigh the shortfall in terms of space standards. With regards to parking standards, as the spaces are unallocated, the proposal is required to provide 9.9 spaces, and therefore it exceeds this. Weight should also be attributed to the location of the site with good transport links. There is also a change to condition 11 to reference to unallocated parking in respect to this. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Greg. And Andrew Waters to speak on Montague Town Council.
Chairman, members of the committee, I shall be very brief with this one. Basically to say that the Town Council wishes to support this application. We believe that it is a development that is appropriate for its location within the town and is in keeping with the design guide of the borough and the adopted core strategy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we hear members' comments, I'll just add that for the avoidance of doubt and for reassurance, particularly Rochelle, this is actually affordable housing because it cannot be sold to buy to let. Not under current legislation, anyway.
The one coming forward will be.
Okay, but it's just that it's not until the very last page of the report, on page 178, that you actually get to be told that in this report. So just I appreciate it's not actually a planning matter whether it's affordable housing or not, but I think it is relevant to draw that to members' attention. This would be added to Wokinghams affordable housing stock. Okay, members, John, as because I think as the executive member, this included in your responsibilities over here.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I welcome the use of this piece of land to deliver much needed affordable housing in the town centre. And I will support it. I would just say, though, in conclusion, I don't think the directors of Wokingham Housing will be signing the 106 section agreement for affordable housing. That's actually what it says in there.
Thank you. Just, I'm concerned about the space. It's not considered material, the fact that it's below the space. It's actually 11% down.
You're talking internal space?
Internal space, sorry. Yeah. Internal spaces, it's 7.5 down. 7.5 square metres down on 70. You know, at what point do we say that it is significant? To me, that seems quite a discrepancy, and I just wonder whether, in fact, I know we're not here to redesign things, but I just wonder what's practical there.
So basically from 1st October we've had new internal space standards come in. Because we have a policy regarding that, any development must adhere to them. But it does also mean that we can make a planning judgment when they are below that standard. In this instance, although yes, it is slightly below the higher occupancy, it is above the lower occupancy. It does kind of depend how far you want to go into it, but I think that the planning judgment in this case is the fact that the scheme is an allocated housing site, it's for affordable housing, and that benefit far outweighs the slightly negative impact of not meeting that standard.
Okay.
Can I just clarify one question, Chairman? Kind of just at both, does this meet the Borough Design Guide standards and that's those in the MDD?
Yes, it would.
Okay, and it's the same situation as we had previously. Do you recall in the earlier application we were saying there's a slight under provision, there's a slight under amount of, put my teeth in. We haven't quite got the right amount of space into the standards, but the standards are new, and because the scheme has actually been developed before the standards came into play, then there's an element of flexibility. However, again, it was Conor referred to it earlier in the discussion about the Arborfield SDL, is that we would normally now expect the new national standards to be adhered to, but they do actually, what you've got before you now, just comply with the borough design guide and the MPD policy.
So we're in a transitional period.
Absolutely.
Sorry, so it does comply with the previous standards?
It complies with borough design guide standards, yes.
It does not
But not
comply with the new
currently.
emerging standards. Fine, but we have to...
It does predate it?
Yes.
Yes, it
Thank
does.
you.
I'd like to say thank you for providing some affordable homes in the town centre as opposed to Elmsfield, which will have no affordable homes apparently according to the last plan. I think we should have more affordable homes there as well.
All right. Any other members wishing to speak? Right. In that case, we will go straight to the recommendation, which is as detailed in the agenda, with the change to, I think it's just condition 11 relating to unallocated parking that is referred to in there. So, members, could you please indicate?
Can I just add the bit where it says in conclusion they have to sign the S106 agreement?
Okay.
It actually says in that.
Okay.
No, you don't.
Okay. Members, please indicate. And that is unanimously supported.
Section 106 is
Well done.
limited to affordable.
Thank you.
Going up to paying contributions.